London in the year 1700 was a city standing on the edge of the modern world. If we could look down upon it from above, we would see a sprawling metropolis shedding its medieval skin and dressing itself in the red brick and white stone of a new century. On the throne sat King William III, a man often in ill health who preferred the clean air of Kensington Palace to the smoke and grime of Whitehall. His reign marked a shift in the city's character. The wild hedonism of the Restoration was fading, and a more serious mercantile energy was taking hold. The architecture of the city told the story of its recent trauma. Just 34 years earlier, the Great Fire had erased the old wooden heart of London. By 1700, the rebuilding was largely complete. The narrow timber buildings that had leaned over the streets were gone, replaced by neat, uniform rows of brick houses. Rising above them all was the white dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, the masterpiece of Sir Christopher Wren. It was brand new, gleaming against the gray sky, a symbol of a city that had refused to die. Yet despite this modern face, the layout of the streets remained medieval. They were a labyrinth of twisting lanes and dark alleys where the sun struggled to reach the cobblestones. For the wealthy inhabitants of London, life was a performance, and the city was their stage. The aristocracy and the rising merchant class were beginning to migrate westward, away from the noise and smell of the city, towards the open squares of Bloomsbury and St. James. Here, they lived in spacious townhouses with high ceilings and large sash windows that let in the light. If you were a rich man in 1700, your appearance was your currency. The most important item you owned was your wig. These were the days of the full-bottomed periwig, a massive cascade of curled hair that rested on the shoulders. To appear in public without one was unthinkable, almost as bad as being naked. These wigs were heavy, hot, and expensive, often costing as much as a middling merchant earned in a year. Beneath the wig, men wore coats with long, stiff skirts and waistcoats embroidered with silver and gold thread. They walked with a cane, not for support, but for posture, and their shoes had red heels to show they did not need to walk in the mud. The women of the upper class were equally constrained by fashion. They wore the mantua, a gown with a wide silhouette that displayed acres of expensive silk. Their faces were painted white with lead-based makeup, and they applied small patches of black velvet to their cheeks. These patches, known as mouches, were used to hide smallpox scars, but they also became a secret language of flirtation, depending on where they were placed. A day in the life of a wealthy Londoner revolved around leisure and status. The morning might be spent in a private dressing room, attending to the complex rituals of the toilette. By midday, the men would head to the coffee houses. In 1700, these were the centers of the universe. Places like Lloyd's or Garraway's were packed with men, smoking long clay pipes and reading the daily broadsheets. This was where the rich gambled on stocks, shared shipping news, and debated the politics of Europe. It was a world of smoke and caffeine, where fortunes could be made or lost in a single conversation.
Oh yes, that's much better. One must always maintain appearances, mustn't one?
I tell you, sir, the Spice Islands are here, not where your fanciful lines suggest.
Nonsense! Your map is outdated by a decade. The Dutch have already claimed this route.
While the men talked business, the ladies might take a carriage to the new exchange on the Strand to shop for gloves and ribbons, or promenade in St. James Park to see and be seen. In the evenings, the wealthy gathered at the theater, or held lavish dinner parties where the table groaned under the weight of French wines and roasted meats, illuminated by the soft glow of hundreds of beeswax candles. But for the vast majority of Londoners, this life of leisure was a fantasy. For the normal people, the working class and the poor, London was a city of relentless labor and struggle. They lived in the shadow of the new brick mansions, in cramped tenements in the East End, or in the dark alleys off Fleet Street. Their homes were often single rooms with dirt floors, where whole families slept together for warmth. The day for a commoner started before dawn. The sounds of the city were their alarm clock, the clatter of iron wheels on stone, the ringing of church bells, and the street cries of vendors selling milk, prole, and oysters. Work was physically exhausting. Down at the docks, men with calloused hands unloaded heavy barrels of tobacco and sugar from the ships that crowded the Thames. It was dangerous, back-breaking work, and a slip on the wet wood could mean a broken limb and destitution. In the markets like Smithfield and Billingsgate, the noise was deafening. Butchers' apprentices carried carcasses of meat on their shoulders, their clothes stained with blood, while fishwives gutted the morning's catch with practiced speed. The smell of the city was a physical force. It smelled of coal smoke, unwashed bodies, rotting vegetables, and the open sewers that ran down the center of the streets. For the ordinary woman, life was a constant cycle of washing, cooking, and mending. Without running water, every drop had to be carried from a pump or bought from a water carrier. Laundry was a brutal chore, done in communal troughs with harsh lye soap that cracked the skin. Yet despite the hardship, there was a vibrancy to their lives. In the evenings, the taverns were full. Ale was the staple drink, safer than the water, and the pubs were warm and loud, filled with singing and the smoke of cheap tobacco. Trade was the heartbeat of the common man. Shopkeepers opened their shutters early, displaying their wares to the street. Shoemakers, bakers, and tailors worked in small workshops, often with their windows open to catch the light. Apprentices, bound to their masters for 7 years, slept under the counters, dreaming of the day they would become freemen of the city. Looking back at London in 1700, we are left with a collection of powerful memories and sensations. It is a memory of a city that was darker than we can imagine. At night there were no streetlights, only the flickering oil lamps and the torches of link boys cutting through the gloom. It was a city of deep shadows, where crime was a constant threat, and the night watchman's cry was the only comfort. It is a memory of the cold. This was the era of the Little Ice Age. The winters were long and biting. The River Thames, the great highway of the city, would freeze solid. We can imagine the surreal sight of the frost fairs, where tents were set up on the ice and oxen were roasted over fires built right in the middle of the river. It was a moment when the terrifying power of nature became a playground for the resilient people of London. We remember the mud, the legendary London sludge that coated everything. We remember the fog that mixed with the coal smoke to create a pea souper that burned the throat. But mostly, we remember the energy. London in 1700 was a teenager of a city, awkward, growing fast, and full of potential. It was poised on the brink of becoming the capital of a global empire. The people who walked these streets, the men in their heavy wigs, and the women in their wool shawls, the princes and the powers, were the lifeblood of this transition. They endured the fires, the plagues, and the cold to build the foundation of the modern world. When we use AI to reconstruct these scenes, we are not just looking at old buildings, we are witnessing the daily heroism of ordinary life in a time that was both magnificently beautiful and brutally hard. This was their London, a city of stone, smoke, and survival. I am Charlie, and this is my channel, Charlie Reconstructs History. Thank you for taking this journey back in time with me. Now, I need your help to decide where we go next. Which lost city or forgotten moment in history do you want me to reconstruct? Tell me in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.
Kau yang buat sama orang kau dengan music bodoh yang asal mesra tak terdengar.